With Shadowlands released, it is more than obvious now that the Lich King was really not that big of a threat. Right now, we can see Ner'Zhul within the Maw as he's tortured due to the jailer perceiving him as a failed servant. However, what exactly is going on with Arthas? Was he really just a mindless minion of Zovaal, or was he playing a game that we could not understand at the time, attempting to ultimately betray his master? Brought to you by Gamivo. Use my link to get Shadowlands in game time cheaper as well as any other game. Use code Doron for an additional discount. The story of the Lich King was recently changed quite a bit. Previously, we knew it was Kil'Jaeden that with the help of the Dreadlords created the Jailer of the Damned in order to lay the foundation for the upcoming Burning Legion invasion. Now, as far as we are aware, the events occurred in much the same manner. However, a big difference is that now this was all a part of Zovaal's master plan directed by Shadowlands forces. Through Primus, he acquired and planted Frostmourne, somehow delivering it into the hands of the Legion that subsequently used it to control the Lich King. However, as far as we're aware right now, Frostmourne was way more than just a powerful enchanted sword. It was quite literally the conduit of the Jailer that split souls of the defeated, and we have seen that the Jailer then keeps these fragments right in his vault and he kinda uses them as bartering chips to blackmail all these various characters. Now, the relationship between Zovaal and the Lich King is still unclear and we can only speculate. However, at least the Jailer Ner'Zhul Lich King one is completely clear. The Jailer was pissed that pretty much all that Ner'Zhul did was try to escape and he was a failure, and then he betrayed him, and for that he decided to imprison whatever remains of his soul in a cage that you can now face off against in the Sanctum of Domination. Now, it is unclear what is the relationship between Arthas and the Jailer, but it is quite obvious that the Lich King as a project was a failure, or at least a half failure. The reason I say it is a failure is because that is exactly what the Jailer said himself, and he created the project. He wanted the Lich King to pave the way for his invasion and arrival into Azeroth, and well, as far as we're aware, that didn't happen, at least not yet. However, it was half successful because it did cause a lot of mayhem, and ultimately some of the ground was set up for Zovaal to be able to manipulate Sylvanas to destroy the Lich King, therefore connecting Azeroth to the Shadowlands as we have that giant void. So while the Lich King failed, Sylvanas was pretty much plan B. However, was the Lich King really a servant of the Jailer, or was he ultimately just a huge thorn in his side? I think with the last and the final Lich King, this was more than obvious. Bolvar was a major annoyance for the Jailer, which is why he put Sylvanas on this grand crusade to ultimately destroy him and why he empowered her so much. I think we finally know the real context of the famous "there must always be a Lich King." We always believed that this was just so that the Scourge doesn't go crazy and just unleash itself upon the living, and while that is still kind of a thing, it is pretty safe to say that this is just a minor consequence of this. The real reason why there must always be a Lich King was so that he can serve as the anchor between the Shadowlands and so that what had happened wouldn't really happen, which is pretty much why as soon as Bolvar was defeated, the gigantic hole in the sky appeared and why we are now in the Shadowlands. So yes, it is pretty clear that the Lich King backfired completely against his creator when Bolvar took the throne, and that Bolvar had delayed his plans by, what, nearly a decade. But the reality was that Bolvar was just a human paladin, a very powerful one, but still a human, and he was essentially like this tiny pin holding on a giant metal door, and it was only a matter of time until the Jailer just came crashing in. So now we have established that Ner'Zhul was a failure as he only attempted to escape his prison, and that Bolvar was actively working against his master. However, the real question is, what if the in-between, you know, the most important Lich King ever, Arthas? Was Arthas just a mindless servant of the Lich King, or was he also working against the Jailer? As we have not seen him yet in the Shadowlands, this is really a hard question to answer, but luckily we do have some information from before the Lich King novel and chronicle, and I think we can make decent attempts at speculation out of these. As all of you already know, Arthas was strict to become the Lich King, but as soon as he did become one, he decided to go all out, and I think everyone can agree with me on this, that Arthas was really the most powerful Lich King ever. He turned turned the Master of the Dead that was nearly defeated by Illidan into a superpower controlling an entire continent from a giant metal citadel that was pretty close to taking over the entire world. When Arthas claimed the throne, it was not long until he defeated his own humanity by throwing away his heart, and even more importantly, he got rid of Ner'Zhul so that he can consolidate all the power. Now, this bit is explained in Chronicle Volume 3. Arthas in life was quite a zealot, and his sense of justice at any cost is exactly what led him to becoming evil. Now, as he turned into the Jailer of the Damned, he still kinda kept his sense of justice, but it was a completely perverted version of it. His line of thinking was that there needed to be a singular force that could stand against the Legion and the Void, and in order to accomplish that, he first needed to be the sole ruler as the Lich King, which is exactly why he got rid of Ner'Zhul, and then he wanted to take over the entire planet, turning everyone into undead. Now, on first glance, it makes sense as undead are like the best weapon against the Legion and the corruptible forces of the Void, as they can't really be turned against themselves and they're quite resilient. However, why this is perverted justice is because, yeah, standing up against the Legion is great and all, but what is the point of defending Azeroth if there is no life on it and everyone is just a part of the Scourge? Is there really much difference between the Scourge taking over Azeroth or the demonic armies? However, this side of his character here is crucial. We were told that he wanted to have a united front against the Legion and the Void, but as before, we didn't know anything of the Jailer. What if his ultimate goal was not just the Legion, but he wanted to resist and break free from Zovaal? I think honestly, it will make complete sense, as it was always clear that someone was constantly whispering to the Lich King. I think Arthas may have realized that Zovaal, just like the Legion, wanted to get someone into Azeroth and exploit it, and the only way for him to stop him was to expand the Scourge, get powerful enough, and to ultimately become independent. The Lich King did break free from the Legion, but I think Zovaal was just another beast entirely, as he controlled him directly through the Helm of Domination and Frostmourne. So a completely different set of power was needed in order to counter this domination. Now, on the other hand, it is entirely possible that Arthas was just a servant of the Jailer and that he did indeed just want to expand his power and to lay the ground for his ultimate invasion, but really, knowing Arthas as a character, I feel like the first scenario is quite a bit more likely. This one is technically completely viable, but at least I'd like to believe that Arthas was a rebel until the end, sort of an even more twisted version of Illidan. Arthas always really seemed smart, well, mainly after he became undead, and he did trick and manipulate many races, which is exactly why he became so powerful. Prince Arthas is among the few, if not the only boss that didn't completely underestimate us as players. He pretty much knew that we win all the time, so instead of destroying us, he constantly sent challenge after challenge our way, and when he realized that we beat all of them, it was now the time to draw us in and to resurrect the ultimate Death Knights that would accomplish his unknown goals. That is also ultimately how he was defeated, as not even himself was strong enough to do all that, and in the end, Arthas also underestimated Light and Tyrion. I'd say the question of whether Arthas was a servant or not can only be answered once we actually encounter him in the Shadowlands. I believe it is highly likely that he actually was rebellious, which is why after his death he didn't get reunited with the Jailer in the Maw, and more than likely he would be able to escape this realm if it was not for vengeful Uther, who decided to just deliver him there anyway. In this case, Arthas could really be Illidan 2.1, and Icecrown Citadel could literally be the version 2 of Black Temple, where we, by fighting, essentially worked in the favor of some higher beings that had even worse plans for our planet. Thank you for watching. Check out what is going on with Arthas in the Shadowlands by clicking on the screen, and also check out Doronsmovies Academy for videos on real world history and science. See you next time.